Hey guys, welcome to Choke Points. And in this video, we are going to talk about the rare earths. For past few years, actually, in fact, I would say for past decade, we have been just talking about rare earths, and this thing has actually the frequency of this has gone up in past. I would say 2 3 years after Russia-Ukraine war started, and since then, it's all about rare earths, or natural resources, right? So the question really is, what exactly are these rare earths? And why are they so important? Why pretty much every major power that's out there is spooked about it? And if you look at it, then everyone has their own military hardware. They all have their own military industrial complex and all that. But for some reason, they're all spooked. Rare earth. So the question is, why is that? Why this sounds like a national security threat? In fact, President Trump has openly said that this is a national security threat. So what exactly is going on? And in this video, I'm going to explain you everything properly. Okay, I'm going to explain you everything properly, and this is going to be a very interesting podcast. All right, so stay with me till the end. Please do like and subscribe, and let's get started. Okay, and in this video, I'm going to tell you that what exactly the rare are or is, how important they are, then how and why the world was asleep up until now, right? Why all of a sudden they woke up and oh crap, we are just behind. What's going on here, right? So all of a sudden they all woke up, but they're like, okay, we need rare earths now. Hmm? Then then also you notice that Russia-Ukraine war is going on, and then Russia-Ukraine, in the middle of Russia-Ukraine war, President Trump was offering Ukraine rare earth deal and all that, rare earth mining deals and everything else too. I mean, who wants to do that? I mean, if you really want to, either you want to stop the war first and then like get into it. I mean, you're saying that okay, stopping the war, the precondition to that will be that let's sign the rare earth deal. But when Russians offered it, President Trump did not say a word about it, right? These are important things. This is the point that you have to look into, and this is the thing that actually, that these are the kind of things that define the geopolitics. All right. So let's get started. Let's talk about it. Please do like and subscribe. And yeah, let's go. See, first thing first is this, that why the first question is that why rare earths actually now decide the global power. So so rare earth decide the global power. Why they do it? I'm gonna give you some data here. Okay. So the data would be like, let me share my slide real quick. Okay. So this way, uh, you are with me at all times. All right. So, and pretty much in my most of my podcasts, you're gonna see the slides. Okay. I prefer to share the slides so that everyone is with me. Okay. So first thing first is the rare earth power. They power the modern military F-35 or pretty much any fighter jet. Okay. And in if you put things in perspective, you find that F-35 uses almost 417 kilograms of rare earths. A Virginia class submarine requires nearly 4.5 tons of rare earths. A single offshore wind turbine uses 600 to 800 kilograms of neodymium magnets. Think about it, okay? Because they have to move, and then they have to convert the wind into the electricity, right? The kinetic energy that they gain from the wind's potential energy, so that becomes the electric energy later on, and for that you need big, really big magnets. Hmm? Then China processes 87% of the rare earths and produces 92% of finished magnets. Think about it. 87% of the world's rare earths and produces 92% of the finished magnets. In 2022, US found the Chinese alloys inside the F-35 engine lubrication pump, halting deliveries. So when US found out in 2022 that there were Chinese alloys inside F-35 engine lubrication pump, think about it. So they halted the deliveries of F-35, and after that, nobody was talking about F-35. And then also you probably might have heard this news that there are Chinese are spying on us. China is spying on us. But actually, the whole spying thing came from this. Why this happened? I'm going to tell you the story. The story is that in 2010, when China actually blocked Japan from giving the rare earths, all right? So it spoke the Western countries that, hey, wait a minute, let's look into it, okay? And then when they started to dig deep into it, they found out that pretty much every chip that's out there in the fighter jet or any military hardware that's there, right? Any military hardware, any computer chip, you just name it. It's all Chinese hardware, Chinese rare earths. So that's what spooked them, and that's when this whole narrative started that China is spying on us. Okay, it was not a cyber warfare. They never said that it's cyber warfare, because cyber warfare is done by pretty much every country on every country, and that's something you cannot track because of VPN and lots of other tracking devices and everything else. Okay, routing devices. Sorry. So so because they found that out, so they this spooked the whole entire Western world. In fact, not just Western world, pretty much any country that was buying all this hardware from China, it spooked them. Even in India too, it spooked India. So India started to notice that there were certain things, certain hardwares they were using that were Chinese parts. Okay. And so that's when everyone woke up. All right. Now, if you look at some more data here, this is gonna get interesting. So this triggered basically what? Pentagon's rare earth emergency program. All of a sudden, emergency program now, okay? Largest since the Cold War. Now, today's question is no longer where do this whole thing come from, right? The chemistry of it. I'm not gonna teach you chemistry, but let's talk a little bit about it. Okay, what's going on, why only China is so dominant, why not other countries are dominant? You have to ask this question to yourself that, hey, isn't US has this much big economy, big landscape, so much area, so many of those things, and then all of a sudden, why US cannot mine anything? Let's say US cannot mine. Why India cannot mine anything? Why Russians haven't done that? Russia has such a big land mass, right? And so much natural resources and all that. So why Russians are not even in this field? Why European Union is not in this field? Why Africa is not in this field? Think about that. Why nobody thought about it up until now? Right, so that's the important part. Now let's look into the little bit of what rare earths are and why do they matter, right? See, rare earths are what? 17 elements, including neodymium, praseodymium, praseodymium, europium, and terbium, and dysprosium. Okay, these are basically, they're called in the periodic table. If you go look at the Mendeleev's periodic table, you find that they are in the lanthanide. There is a lanthanides group, then there is actinides group. Okay, so lanthanide groups are the basically rare earths. Okay, now uh why this is important? See, every, you name it, every smartphone that's out there, it has, every smartphone has almost 8 to 12 types of different types of rare earths. Electric vehicle motors, 1 to 2 kilograms of rare earth magnets are required. Anywhere you will see, anywhere you have dynamo system involved in it. Okay, dynamo, where you are moving a coil inside a magnet. You're going to see, you have to generate the electricity. Magnet is required. When magnet is required, clearly that's rare earth. Okay, then Patriot missile launchers, they actually hundreds of precision magnets are there. Okay, components. So neodymium, then dysprosium, all these are used in there. Now, if you notice, I'll give you another interesting thing. Okay, that just what couple of months ago, right? President Trump was talking about giving tomahawk to who? Ukraine. And then around that time, China said that okay, we are going to block the rare earths. We were thinking about giving it back to you, giving it to you, but now we are going to totally block it. But nobody ever said that why China all of a sudden is blocking it. Even though President Trump posted on Truth Social that they have very good relationship with President Xi. President Xi is awesome and this and that. President Xi is probably gonna have dinner with them. They're gonna have beer together, all that good stuff. But poof, China immediately blocked it. Why is that? That's because China simply sent out the message that, hey, if you decide to give tomahawk or anything, we are going to block all the rare earths and you won't have any tomahawk. You won't have the raw material to even produce tomahawk. Okay. So that's why after that, no tomahawk or anything was given to Ukraine. And now all of a sudden, President Trump is simply deciding to back out of Ukraine. Think about it. All right. Now, so this is the whole entire situation with the rare earths. Now, what there's one thing about rare earth is this, that rare earths are not so rare as much as people would like to think. The problem with earth is this, that the technology in that is involved in refining and processing them, that is a very, I would say, that's very technical, and that involves some high tech tools. Okay, and it so you have to invest lots of money into it. And then what happens is that when you after the processing is done, so let's say you have 10 kilograms of, say, some crude stuff where you know that rare earth is. So when you process and all that, probably you will get few grams of rare earth from it. That's how much it matters, and that's how tricky it gets to actually process it. Now, why it is tricky to refine it is because all the rare earths have pretty much the same chemical and physical properties. Okay, so because they all have same chemical and physical properties, so it's really really hard to separate them. All right, so if you want to, let's say you want to separate europium from terbium, they will have separate similar properties. So when they have similar properties, then how are you planning to separate them? So that requires lots of tricks, because you need specialized tools to do those things, right? For example, I'll give you explain a little bit more, that let's say you put sand in the water. Okay, if you put sand in the water, then all you need is a sieve, a filter basically, and put water in it, and sand is gonna be separated from water. Easy peasy, right? But if you have to separate sugar from water, sugar that is already dissolved in water, then what happens? Then you have to really boil the water, collect the water somewhere else, and then make sure that then you condense that water. Then what's going to happen? Chances are that then some sugar will be left behind. All right, and the water will be on in the other container, and they are separate. Okay, these are some of the techniques that's there, right? So if so, why? Because these two chemicals or compounds have different properties. For example, water and oil, they don't mix, so density is different, right? Since density is different, so it's easy to to separate oil from water. But when you have physical and chemical properties, most of those same, then what happens is that it gets tricky, because then you have to identify those properties that are different for those chemicals, and then you have to separate them. Then you have to figure a way out to use those different properties to separate those chemicals, right? Meaning that, let's say if there are five types of rare earths in one crude, right? Not the crude oil, but I'm saying the crude material, that raw material that we have. So so you need some tool that can actually do this calculation for all five different types of rare earths. So now imagine how difficult that is, right? So what happened over the years is that China invested into this thing heavily. Okay. China provided subsidies to its companies to do all this work. Okay. And this is how US ended up losing the control of this whole thing up until, now, for example, uh, up until after Cold War 1970s, up until 1970s, 80s, around that time frame, US was leading this whole entire thing. That's why they were building rock solid hardware. But after that, what happened is that when they started to work with China, and China started to get more involved into all these affairs, then what happened is the US shut down the Mountain Pass processing in 2002. And clearly there were environmental lawsuits and low prices and this and that were introduced in it, to just to show public that, hey, because of this we are shutting it down. Okay, that's in California. Then you have Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping in 1992. Famously, he said that what the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. China basically heavily invested into this thing. Once Chinese saw that this rare earth will be the backbone of their foreign policy. Okay. So, and then what they did is the Chinese, and this is Chinese strategy all along, regardless of rare earths or not. What they do is that their goal is the government, Chinese government invests so much money into their companies and provides them so much subsidies that these companies, they just simply lower the prices. Okay, they start to make prices things so cheap that the local products, they go out of business all of a sudden. Okay, they go out of business, and this is how China actually killed this 70% of global competition. And US started to move its manufacturing and everything else to China. Okay, now you have to understand, see, the understand the mechanism here. Okay, the mechanism is that the military industrial complex, US military industrial complex, yes, it takes instructions from Pentagon and all, but how many Pentagon officials really go and uh, look after the, or look into the manufacturing process as to what exactly hardware is being put in there, or what hardware is, where the hardware is coming from? All military industrial, all these companies are Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, all these companies, all they have to do is just say the word that, yeah, this is all American made and this and that, look how good it looks, look at the black matte finishing and this and that, all the things they say. And all they have to do the marketing. But in reality, they're looking to increase their profits, and considering that, why profit? It's not even about the profit margin. See, at the end of the day, they have to make a competitive product that's gonna sell in the international market at an affordable price, just like car, right? Hmm? So if you are making a fighter jet that is costlier than anything else in the world, but just does the same thing, then what good that is? Doesn't matter how much you try to sell it with the so-called stealth BS or something or something or something. At the end of the day, every fighter jet has two main components: engine and radar. Okay, so that's just fighter jets. But I'm just talking about pretty much any military hardware, right? So, so all these companies have to import certain things from outside to reduce the cost, to cut the cost, right? So that's exactly what happened over the years when US and China joined hands, that okay, we will send all the things to you and we will import from you while you manufacture. Then on the name of saving the climate, they were basically trying to promote the petrodollar. That was the whole thing. Okay. And when they signed all these deals, so rare earths and all these manufacturing also went to China. And slowly, US started to shut down its mines all over, cutting the local jobs as well, because there were lots and lots of towns that relied heavily on mines. Okay, miners, those miners, that those mines were their sole livelihood, source of income. Hmm? So by 2010, China controlled 97% of global rare earth production by 2010. And then US Department of Defense actually report came out, and that by 2015 US became 100% dependent on what? This whole entire rare earth on China. Okay, so what they did is that American companies like General Motor, they sold their magnet patents to China's San Juan in 1990s, a historic blunder that gifted China global dominance in magnets. US was never like this. You have to understand this. See, why? Because US built all these things way before China, way before anybody else. In fact, US actually helped Japan in set up its semiconductor industry and all that. Okay, that's how we landed on moon in 1969. It wasn't a hoax. You have to understand this. Lots of people say that it's a hoax and this and that. In your dreams, I mean, that's a way to underestimate the technology and all that thing. But US, when US was US, then US was way ahead of its time. Okay, so I will tell you what exactly happened in 1969. Okay, lots of you, because lots of people say that, oh, if it's that's the case, then what happened to all the data? Most of the people who actually call it a hoax, the reality of it is that they have probably, how do I say it? Probably barely any understanding of science, how space works, how the technology behind it works, and how the data streaming works, how the data storage works, and what exactly is involved in sending something to the moon and back. So, and people normally raise probably 40, 50 questions when actually the whole entire junk of, like, not junk, but the whole entire pile of questions are there if you really get down to it. But reality is this, that US did land on the moon in 1969. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. The interesting thing is that US had the streaming technology. Okay. IBM had the streaming technology back then. Do you guys know what exactly IBM and other companies lagged in those days? Which is something nowadays which seems pretty irrelevant actually and surprising when I will tell you. And that thing is I will let you guess. And for that you have to subscribe. Right? Subscribe. All right. That thing is the storage devices. In those days, there were no storage devices. Okay, streaming, data streaming, networking, all that was easy peasy stuff. That was done. But storing large chunk of data in one place and then reading from that data, that storage devices were just not there. Technology to store the data was not, digital data was not there. That's the problem. That was the main problem. Nowadays we see 100 GB into my in this smart micro SD card. That wasn't the case back then. That was the flaw, or that was the, I would say, shortcoming in our technology. Okay, that's why you don't see much data. Whatever they could, they did, but most of it was saved on a tape drive, and tape drives don't last long, actually. Okay, so that's why you see those problems. But anyways, why I was telling you all this is because of the rare earths. That's how advanced the US tech was. Okay, we launched the Saturn rocket. Now imagine how much rare earth it takes to launch a Saturn V rocket like that. Hmm? So it was, but then all of a sudden we lost grip over things, um, and we gave it to China and every other country, right? So so the question really now is, since China took over, the question is how US can actually mine back. Can they go back to it? So yes, they can actually. So now let me show you some data on that as well. So Mountain Pass mine is there in California. It produces 40,000 tons of rare earths ore per year, then however 100% mountain ore past this basically material had to be sent to China for processing as recently as 2018. They have to still send that material to China for processing. Here's the thing though, you have to understand, they may be sending the raw material, all right, they may be sending the raw material to China to processing, but they don't know how much rare earth they are going to get out of it. Let's say if they're sending that material to China, and China processes, and China gets 10 gram out of this whole thing, and China is just sending probably back like 7 grams. They're saying that, hey, this is what we got, and keeping the 3 grams for themselves. Now, for lots of people who don't know, I will give you it's like, it's like jewel thieves, or no, I always say jewel smiths, sorry. So jewel smiths, what they do is that when they make jewelry, they melt those gold and all that. So what they do is that they keep a small amount of gold or something to themselves, saying that, yeah, this is what, this is the jewelry, and they will keep the rest of the gold to themselves. That's what they do. Okay, that's how they collect the gold from all of their customers and all that. Okay, that's the technique. All right, now so let's go back to it. I was just giving you the interesting thing. So new mining projects include what? The Bear Lodge, Wyoming, the Round Top, Texas, then Bocom Mountain in Alaska. And then, according to 2004 USGS data government survey, the US hosts 2.3 million tons of rare earths reserve. So it's not a far-fetched thing. It's there. It's just that processing is not there, and now we'll have to invest into processing. Okay, now then I can show you some which US refineries are being built to replace China. Basically, the MP Materials refineries, their Linus US facilities. These are all Pentagon funded projects right now, all right? And Blue Line refining in Texas. Then you have Energy Fuels in Utah, all that, okay? And these are all Pentagon funded projects. Pentagon is heavily investing into all this, all right? Then, but the question now is that how this has become a national security threat. It's just cheap. You're putting it into things, this, that. So, how is that a national security risk? Let me give you some data on that as well. Okay. Now, according to the 2022 Department of Defense simulation, okay, F-35 production will slow down 6 to 8 weeks if China stop blocks this whole thing. Okay, F-35 production will slow down by 6 to 8 weeks. Raytheon and Lockheed missile output will drop to 20 to 40% within months. Okay, and naval radar system would face immediate shortages if US lacks the rare earths. Yeah, if US doesn't have any rare earths, okay, or the Chinese import drop is there, this is what's going to happen. Electric vehicles and wind turbine production would see major delays. So when President Trump says that this climate change and all this is a hoax and this and that, so it's not because he doesn't believe that, yeah, pollution should not be there, our environment should not be pollution, I mean, it should be pollution free and this and that. That's one of the many aspects of it, because I think that at that position he knows a lot more than you and I. But because of lots of intel that's going, but I think the main reason he is being saying this is because of this national security threat, that we don't even have the processing power to actually generate enough rare earths. And that too, like, yeah, you're gonna put all that into what? Wind turbine, really? So that's why he's been backing out, that because this is just not a sustainable thing in the current context, right? Because you are trying to make your energy infrastructure dependent on all these things. Huh? Something that can be actually, that can completely cripple your economy, can cripple your national security, I mean everything else, just by a simple embargo on the rare earths. If China simply puts a export embargo, blocks it, then yeah, let's say you have full-fledged dependent infrastructure, right? The renewable energy and all that, guess what? Gone pecan. So that's why it's a national security threat. Now, what exactly is going on after this? At this, when the world realized that this is national security threat, and this is not a problem just in US, this same thing was identified in India too. And what India did is that India has started to sunset all those product, all those military hardwares, and they are actually producing their own, completely their own, instead of relying on China and all that. Okay, so this is not a very serious problem, and this has been identified all over the world at this point. All right, now, and this is why there is a race for alternative supply chains. And what's going on in that sense, in that area, is this: the Western nations basically, they are, after all this, China is working on it. China is, sorry, Australia is working on it, right? Australia's Linus company is there. Then Canada is expanding its critical mineral thing. Japan has long invested into this thing, and India is, of course, investing heavily into it, right? So, but the overall, see, overall, the main challenge in doing this whole thing is you're building a complete integrated supply chain outside of India that is not going to be a national security threat. Meaning that you mine the rare earths, you process, you extract, do everything in your own country. Now, if you do that, let's say if US does that, what will be the economic impact of it? That's the important question, right? Because right now you have $1 trillion budget. You are producing all these military hardware, but when you are processing and extracting, doing everything on your own, then chances are that either you will have to increase your budget and cripple your economy further, or the hardware that you're going to produce, you will have to limit the number of it, right? In either case, it's not going to be a good thing. And then if your hardware becomes expensive, then guess what? No other country is going to buy it, because pretty much every country that does not buy US hardware, they simply say that it's too expensive. Okay, it's already expensive. So alternative supply chains are being built, and they are working really hard on this thing. Like, for example, Sweden, Greenland, Tanzania, then Malawi, Brazil, all these countries have identified their rare earths. India has identified their rare earths and all that. Okay, Russians are very much involved into it. Hmm? So this is going on, and then now comes to even more interesting thing, that uh, how important the rare earth is, that it actually, I think that it was one of the main reasons why Russians actually, I would say, they didn't wait to enter Ukraine in 2022. And there is a reason for it. Reason is that by 2020-21, right, the Western governments basically, they declared on China, the war was declared, that okay, that dependence, they said that their dependence, and now we need to find an alternative. Okay. An alternative, the European Union basically was coming up with this whole climate and all that mumbo jumbo, right? And the European Union's only hope was that outside of Europe, they used to get it from Chile or Argentina, or sometimes from Brazil. But they were like, okay, it's best to get from one place, that is Ukraine. Now, Ukraine has almost 22 of those 34 rare earths, okay, and different types. So, so they were heavily dependent on Ukraine. That okay, let's do this and get Ukraine to join European Union and then NATO, and we're good to go. That was the plan, roughly in the air, whatever they were thinking. So, so what they did is the European Union basically, they forced a strategic raw material partnership with Ukraine in 2021. This was on paper. This is not me cooking up some story and telling you. You can go look it up. All right. And in fact, by November 2021, Western and Australian companies, they entered Ukraine for exploration tenders. okay, for exploration tenders of lithium and other critical minerals. Okay, that's what they did. Then after that, uh, so by this time, Russians were keeping an eye on things anyways. But Russians always have a very touchy, very, I would say, sensitive point. Their sensitive nerve is Crimea. Okay, why? Because Crimea is the whole entire thing for Sea of Azov and Black Sea, and Russians don't want to lose that control. Why? Because that's the only warm water source. Without warm water source, there will be no navy. Hmm? So, and Crimea is very critical for Russia's Central Asia policy and the South Asia policy, okay, the foreign policy. So, so that was another thing because they wanted to connect Crimea to the landmass rather than through a bridge. Okay, so Ukraine basically, Ukraine when Ukraine started to sign those deals, then Russians basically were like, okay, it's time to take the action. So, and that's when in February 2022, Russians actually entered Ukraine. And what they did is, if you look into it, then what they did is that they basically uh, entered very strategically, where there were not mines or anything, they did not do much to it. If you go look into it, then you will find that they did not cross the river on, I would say, what, on the northern side of things. They have only went inside where the Russian population was and where there are mines. Okay, they are taking over all that. Okay, and their whole European Union's plan was to uh, use Ukraine so that they can reduce their dependency on Chinese rare earth. And when say European Union, we are talking about NATO. And when we are talking about NATO, we are talking about US military industrial complex. Okay, it's all the same hardware all over. Hmm? So uh, when that happened, then clearly Chinese and Russians did talk about it that, hey, if Ukraine goes there, then my dominance will be gone and they're going to get loads and loads of military hardware after all this. So we will lose control and we will lose the grip over all this. So it's not just the national security threat for Russia. Losing Ukraine was national security threat for China as well. Because if NATO moves in, then who is next? After, let's say, after Russia, who is next? That's the idea, right? So it's not just that NATO or some other country gets spooked. There are Russians and Chinese. These countries also think about their national security too. So we got into what? A literally rare earth war. Even though that wasn't the only reason, but that was definitely one of the primary reasons. And I think that um, two main reasons, basically Black Sea and this rare earth. That's about it. Because that's in multipolar world, these critical minerals, their processing, all these things, they matter a lot. Okay, when in the unipolar world, that unipolar currency mattered, dollar mattered. But now when we are entering multipolar world, then lots of countries you will see that they're gonna be basically bartering things too. The loss of national currency trade actually is nothing but barter. That's how it's gonna transform into over the period of time. And I'm not saying it will be entirely that's how it's gonna be, but at least certain countries whose currency is not strong, so you can just go and talk to them and barter certain things. So these things will start to matter over the period of time, right? So this is it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. You learned something. Please do like and subscribe. And I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.